Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
This is Dr. David Perrodin, and I want to thank you as we begin another journey into school and community safety. If you're looking for industrial safety expert, Appalachian State University professor Dr. Timothy Ludwig, please visit www.safety-doc.com. Again, that's Dr. Timothy Ludwig at www.safety-doc.com. License renewal time, driver's license. I went to the DMV yesterday, and there are new requirements for renewing a driver's license. So, line is 6-7 deep, and people are going up to the attendant, and, in about 30 seconds, they're leaving. And what's happening is they're being told, hey, you have to bring in your social security card, you have to bring in your notarized birth certificate from the hospital, and, other documents. And I didn't have these either. And actually, they weren't on the website. So a little bit of a... I just knew it. I just knew it coming in. And so some of these people are frustrated. And there's a guy ahead of me gets sent to the side. And he's trying to negotiate with the attendant. And he said, hey, I had to drive 40 minutes to get here. And can we do like part of this now? And then I can like bring back the documents. And she's like, sir, it doesn't work that way. And then, he's kind of going off on this rant. Now he's not like over the top, but he's like still trying to engage her in negotiations while she's clearly helping somebody else. And then finally he just takes off. Fortunately for me, I only live a mile from the DMV. So I just went back and got the documents, and everything's done, now. The new license has a star up in the right-hand corner, which allows you to go on military bases and I think any Department of Defense installation. So got that done. Good for another 8 years, which is great. So yeah, a pretty painless process actually, because I didn't live that far away, but boy, oh boy, it was just one person after another getting sent out the door to retrieve documents. And one person was saying, well, I moved here from like Nebraska 20 years ago, and I'm not exactly sure like where I was born and stuff like that. And the lieutenant's like, well, you're going to have to figure that one out and kind of come back to us. So anyway, new license. Yay. I've been running into the blue screen of death here on my Windows 7 machine. And as you might know from previous podcasts, has multiple hard drives, solid state, everything is just like, intense here. It's crazy, 3 monitors. So I'm not sure what's happening. Ran into this issue for the first time about 2 months ago. Then it kind of subsided. I did my Windows updates, and now it's back. So I am going to disconnect the main desktop unit after this podcast is out and then take it in for repair. Hopefully it won't require a full reinstall, which the repair person told me that's what I might be in store for. So we'll see. So there could be some time between episode 75 and episode 76. Got my laptop actually back from the computer person, all tuned and ready to go, but the laptop isn't set up to do this type of broadcasting, and so we're going to wait. If we got to go a little bit of time, there's always 75 episodes you can go through of the Safety Doc, or check in to the other shows on the405media.com out of Los Angeles, California, where the Safety Doc airs 2 p.m. PST daily. I biked 70 miles today. Longest bike trek of the year. Perfect day, 80 degrees, low to moderate humidity, a nice light wind. It was terrific. And I had worked up to this, so it was actually an easy ride. And I saw a number of deer again, saw a few squashed snakes. So I thought they'd be out because, it's a little bit cooler. So they would come out and warm themselves on the pavement, the blacktop. So, which apparently a big mistake. My turnaround point was a cemetery, right? Guess, because I kind of get into these, country cemeteries. And it was an odd experience because I pulled up, and at the same time I pulled up with my bike. Man, I would say in his mid-30s, pulls up in a nice pickup truck, gets out. He's wearing khakis and a dress shirt. And so basically at the halfway point is, I'm taking some Gatorade, beef jerky, and just, some provisions and just resting a little bit before I start the ride back home. And about 20 feet from where I'm standing, so I'm kind of parked next to the fence where the cemetery is. I noticed that there is a grave site where the coffin is there, lowered in, and this, of course, the pile of dirt. And I assume it probably had to be dug by hand because it was very tight, like many gravestones and older gravestones around where this gravestone was. So it's not like you could bring in machinery and excavate. So this guy, this is weird because, he waves to me and I wave back. And he goes over and unbuttons his dress shirt and lays it over a different headstone. And then he grabs a shovel and he starts shoveling the dirt into the hole where the coffin is. And, after, a couple minutes, he would take a break and grab a tamper, which is a device. Basically, they use it for pitcher's mounds to kind of compact the soil, but basically he's compacting the soil before he puts more in. And it was just the strangest thing because I'm like, wow, one is this guy's overdressed for this task. And, it was really strange. So I had, it just seemed really out of place. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's what was going on. Maybe he works for the funeral home, funeral director, mortician. I don't know. Definitely because the way he was dressed. I mean, it was because he was dressed formal and had a very nice vehicle. I don't think he was just, like a lower tier employee with a funeral home or the cemetery or whatever. So, but yeah, as I was kind of taking my Swedish fish and crackers and things like that, he was putting the dirt on this casket, just kind of a weird backdrop. And we didn't say anything. Like, I didn't talk to him. And what do you say to somebody? Like, how's it going today? Like, and there was nobody else there. Again, it's rural. So yeah, just that was strange. We did a 1-day family vacation, which actually turned out great. Went to Dubuque, Iowa, and took in the Mississippi River Museum and also the Fenelon Place elevator. So arrived there. It's about 2-hour drive from where we're at, maybe just a little bit longer. And those were the two things on the agenda. And we stayed right downtown, so we could walk from where we stayed. We could walk to the Fenelon elevator. So anyway, let's talk about this Mississippi River Museum. So if you get to Dubuque, it's a pretty neat town. Like I like Dubuque. I could actually imagine myself living there, which I don't think will ever happen. But I mean, about 60,000 people, I think. And it's the oldest city in Iowa. Anyway, you came into the Mississippi River Museum, which is very well done. I mean, so I wanted this experience for my daughters. This is why I wanted to do this trip, because they are really into museums, and we go often to a Great Lakes Museum up in Superior, but we're not going to Superior this year. So, we kind of switched out this one instead. So it was good. It was good. And as we got there, they had all these signs up that they had the Da Vinci display in addition to the traditional whatever you get through the Mississippi River Museum, which is, got a bit pet stingrays, with 2 fingers on their back as they swam by you and stuff like that. I mean, it was good. I mean, it was good for kids. And then you also had the opportunity to go on a dredge, a originally steam powered dredge from 1934. I think they used it until the 70s and then they retired it. So that was neat, So for me, that was kind of a neat part. But anyway, we're getting our tickets, and the lady who's selling us the tickets is really pushing this Da Vinci display, and she's pointing then a little bit in back of us to this kind of wagon with like some extra gears and stuff on it. And she's like, well, that's something like Da Vinci made. And are you familiar with, Leonardo da Vinci? I'm like, yeah, I kind of got it. I know inventor and all this stuff and whatever, artist and things like that. And she said, well, nothing we have here is like authentic Da Vinci stuff. It's all like replica. But so, do you want to pay so you can get to the floor where this is at and to see these things? And I'm like, which was kind of substantially more. And I was like, no, I've got it. And, for the girls, it's not going to be that big of a thing. And she was pretty like put off by that. She's doing a hard sell on the Da Vinci thing. And like, I get it. And I'm trying to figure out like, how the hell do these two things go together? Like, how does your Mississippi River Museum, which is really more or less an aquarium, and artifacts, Native American artifacts. Again, it's well done, but I mean, to couple that up with this Da Vinci display doesn't seem like that works. So, and an odd thing was like, I don't think you got a specific pass to go up there. Like if we saw people go up who had the same badges that we were given, that I mean, basically it's a sticker that you wear, and then after a certain number of hours, I think it turns from green to white, and that's not any good anymore. But yeah, I think people are going up with the same sticker. I don't know, but yeah, we turned down the Da Vinci display and kind of ruined this lady's day. But I can't imagine. I mean, like I said, it was $10, maybe $10 more, something like that per person. I mean, but again, I have girls that are 7 and 11, like they would have no interest in that. And I've personally, yeah, I didn't have an interest in it either. So, the Fenelon Place elevator, you can Google this. The Fenelon Place elevator is described as the world's shortest, steepest scenic railway, 296 feet in length, elevating passengers 190 feet from 4th Street to Fenelon Place, where you can see this magnificent view of the Dubuque area, also Mississippi River. So it's really cool. We have the attendant that day was a photographer years ago, and that's what she shared with us. So she took our phone and took some phenomenal photos. And actually, she said because of the time of day we were there, and the cloud cover, it was almost like a shadow box effect. She said, which is really cool. And the photos turned out awesome. So this Fenelon Place elevator is pretty cool because it's like it's almost like a small trolley car type thing, and it's just pulled up and down this hill. And basically it was there because I think in the 1880s it was a banker who lived at the top of the hill, and he had to like work his way around down to the bottom of the hill to get to work, and then also over the lunch break to get up for lunch, and that would eat up a lot of his time. So he needed something more efficient. So he came up with this I think it's called a funicular actually. This to get him up and down from his house to his work. So, 3 minutes instead of whatever. So it's cool. You sit in this wooden car, and then your level, once you sit in it, even though like the thing is done on an angle, like the seats are level, so then you go up and down. So that was cool. Like I really like that. Again, it was a good experience for the girls. Glad they had that opportunity to do it. We could walk it again from the hotel, which made it nice, that you didn't have to fire up a car, try to find a parking spot and stuff like that. And yeah, because one of those things that you have to do, like if you're in Dubuque, like you just got to do the Fenelon Place elevator. So check it out. FENELON Place elevator. You ever get to Dubuque, check it out.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc Podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin, author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perrodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perrodin and the Safety Doc Podcast.
So today's show, for the first time, I opted for yes on the organ donor part of my driver's license. Previously, I'd always done no. This time I did yes. And I hadn't thought about it much when I was doing it. Like when I filled out all of the stuff on the form and it got to the organ donor, I was like, well, I've shared this on previous podcasts of, I think the older I get, I get more scientific, and I'm not into all of the maybe ritual, the tradition of, funerals and all of these things and whatever. And the thought was, well, if something happens to me and there's an opportunity to take parts of me to help somebody else, that just seems like that makes sense. And I would want that if I or my family members, needed a liver or heart or something like that. So it didn't seem to make sense to not be an organ donor. Last night, before I get that, I have an administrative assistant, a former administrative assistant of mine, has been on a waiting list for a liver transplant, and she has a non-alcohol related cirrhosis of the liver, which you can get. Of course you can get, but so, you think cirrhosis of the liver, though, you think, oh, someone who's just, drank their entire life. Well, no, there is this non-alcohol related cirrhosis of the liver. So she's been on this waiting list for a organ transplant for a liver. And for a while, for, I would say, a couple of years. So anyway, I don't think about this choice of donor until last night. I'm on the Older Brother podcast as one of the panel members with, about 5 other people. And I had mentioned that day I renewed my license, and I also check the donor box. And pretty much every member of the panel, maybe except one, they were pretty adamantly opposed to donating their organs. And they were kind of like, well, why did you do that? Like that, why would you check yes? And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that. I just, okay. And then they're like, they haven't checked yes. They are not donating organs. And their primary reason for this, and so this is, again, I wasn't thinking about this. But their primary reason, they said, was, Dave, do you think, if you're in a car accident, EMTs pull up and, whatever, and they see, that you're pretty severely damaged. And if you're an organ donor, they pull your ID, are they going to work as hard to save your life as if you're not an organ donor? And I think George Carlin had some bit about that. I know he had some bit about that because I found it. And I thought, yeah, I think so. I know EMTs. I don't think that's a condition that they would use on whether or not they're going to work to save your life. But they were pretty convinced, that the EMTs and also the doctors, that the incentive to save your life if you're an organ donor was diminished. And there's also, they were sharing, there's this lucrative side too of like organ, for hospitals, of organ transplanting. In the U.S., you can't sell organs, in other countries you can, but in the U.S. you can't. But of course, if doctors are doing these transplants, there's this whole, industry that has to be there for organ transplants as far as transporting the organs, as far as, medications for accepting, not rejecting the organ tissue. The doctors are getting paid. Obviously, the hospital's getting paid. I don't know where all of that comes from, but they're saying, this is lucrative business. So I'm thinking, I didn't know about that, didn't think about that. So I'm going to just kind of skip to the end and come back as, like, I'm not arguing against organ donation, and ultimately all of this didn't change my mind. I'm not going back and saying, please issue me a new license without the box checked. But it is one of those things where it's a pretty significant decision, obviously, very significant decision. And, when you have, it's something I didn't anticipate, and where my member check, my friends would kind of have this pullback reaction. So it's one of those things where then, I'm doing my own research, and most of it's coming up positive and some of it's coming up with some really bizarre stories. But, I think that can happen anywhere. That can happen, you can always find these stories that match, the narrative. Like, I think I watched on TV once a funeral home, which would take bones from people and sell them. And then they would put in like PVC pipe or something like that. Which was all obviously illegal and things like that. Those people weren't donors. But anyway, so this kind of took me back. Or I was taken aback, I guess. And did some research. So again, this is the first time I heard anything like this. Like, so doctors aren't going to work as hard to save me if I'm a donor. And, the EMTs, if they see that on the card, they're only going to go so far into what they're going to do and all of this stuff. So again, I went online, found most of the stuff was positive about, organ donation, but there were a couple things that were a little questionable. As again, I would expect with anything. Here is an article by Gizmodo, which I think sums up kind of what my friends were saying. So I'm going to read it. It's short. It's called "The Dark Side of Being an Organ Donor" by Jamie Condliffe, from March 12th, 2012. By the way, so today I was biking through one of the cemeteries, and there was one of the coolest last names on a headstone. I think it was Fogman, Foggman. And I was just thinking, man, if you're like in high school and your name is like David Fogman, like that's cool. Okay. So I'm wondering, like, the Fogman family, I was just like, I've never heard that name before, and it's kind of a cool name. So, but anyway, okay, let's go through this article. Becoming an organ donor is widely considered a good thing. If you die and offer up your body to medicine, you can extend the life of others with zero inconvenience. After all, you're dead. But it turns out that the reality of organ donation isn't quite so crystal clear, and that it's something you might want to lend a little more thought to. Becoming an organ donor is easy. Just tick a box in your driver's license or fill in a simple form. You may not know that you waive your rights to informed consent at that stage. Doctors don't have to tell your relatives where your organs go or what they do to your body to extract them. You have few legal rights. You're dead. Remember. Yeah. That's not too bad, though. I can live with that. But writing for the Wall Street Journal, Dick Teresi raises a more interesting point. The majority of organ donors are victims of head trauma who end up being ruled dead based on brain dead criteria, brain death. Okay. And brain death diagnoses, it's not exactly a clear science. The exam for brain death is simple. A doctor splashes ice water in your ears to look for shivering in your eyes. Okay, didn't know that. Pokes your eyes with a cotton swab and checks for any gag reflex, among other rudimentary tests. It takes less time than a standard eye exam. Finally, it's what's called the apnea test. The ventilator is disconnected to see if you can breathe unassisted. If not, you are brain dead. Some or all of the above tests are repeated hours later for confirmation. So here's the weird part, which is actually in the article I'm reading this. Here's the weird part. If you fail the apnea test, your respirator is reconnected. You'll begin to breathe again, your heart pumping blood, keeping the organs fresh. Doctors like to say that at this point, the person has departed the body. You will now be called a BHC, or beating heart cadaver. Again, new to me, hadn't heard that. The problem is plenty of BHCs still have brain waves. A bigger problem is that very, very occasionally, BHCs even start breathing again by themselves. Whether they're actually dead or not, well, that's up for debate. It's that uncertainty that many people are, quite rightly, starting to worry about. For a deeper insight, you should read Teresi's article. It's really quite thought-provoking. In the meantime, I'm remaining a donor, but hoping for a lack of imminent head trauma. Again, that was by Jamie Conlift from Gizmodo. So I didn't know that. I mean, it seems like something that you should be made aware of at the DMV. Like, it's almost the fact. Some countries actually have you have to opt out of being an organ donor. You're automatically you're in the pool, of being an organ donor unless you explicitly opt out. And in the U.S., you have to opt in. So just an interesting sidebar that I learned. But one of the questions that came up in this, I went to that other article by the Wall Street Journal person, and it was, saying, well, what if you can perceive, what if you can feel your organs being harvested? You can still perceive pain, but you can't express it, through eye movements or, anything, but you can sense these things. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, so he poses that question. It's like, well, but then, I mean, if that's the case and you're declared dead, I mean, everything that happened to you at that point, you would perceive, you could perceive, whether it be if you choose, not if you choose, if you were embalmed, that you'd feel that to a certain extent. It's really strange. It's really strange. So, it gets into all of these weird things of like, how long does consciousness really exist, I guess, in the brain or the mind, even when the instruments that we currently have can't register that the mind, quote unquote, the brain, quote unquote, is alive, is responding, is processing. So, it's a good question. And, I think the equipment will get better at determining that. But again, it's a very, here's what strikes me with this. It seems we should be more informed about this at the DMV. So doesn't it seem that way to you? I mean, it seems that way to me. Like there should be either a pamphlet about what is organ donation and some of these types of thoughts, like the pros and cons. I don't know if this is a con, but just like something that's informed, or that before you become an organ donor, you have to watch a 3-minute video. And I guess it's all positionality, because they could skew it any way that they want it, and they would probably skew it obviously to get you to be a organ donor. Seems like it's weird that the DMV kind of gets put in charge of that. Like, why your primary physician isn't, like, I've never been asked once by my doctor, do you want to be And are you an organ donor? No. Well, do you want to learn about being an organ donor? Do you have any questions? Like, my doctor's never said that. My doctor is really on top of things too. So, I do have a doctor's appointment next month, routine, and am going to ask this question of my doctor of saying, you know what, I had my license renewed and I did opt to be a donor, but then I kind of learned some things after the fact that just have brought forward some questions in my mind, and, just kind of run it by her and be interesting to see what she says. Like, what if a doctor says, no, I'm not a donor? I mean, like, whoa, then I'd be like, okay, I wonder what's up with this. But yeah, that's my plan, is I'm going to just run this by. And again, I don't have plans to change the decision, but it does seem like this huge thing that's kind of put before you. And I guess in your family, really, there's this, that this impact you're having, because hypothetically, you could be in an accident and then your body would be, kept in the hospital and blood going, through veins and stuff like this for a period of time. I don't know, a couple days, maybe. I don't know what the time is, but, while they prepare to harvest your organs. So instead of like dying and then you're dead and okay, the body's released, cremated, gone quickly like that it kind of lingers. And then, and then it's kind of like this weird thing. I remember reading a book by Dave Perry. I don't know if his name is Dave Perry. Michael Perry, right? Not everybody's name is Dave, right? Michael Perry wrote a book. He's an author in Wisconsin. And I forget what it was, like Population 512 or something like that. Talked about a small town he lived in, and he was an EMT, and talked about those experiences plus like other things. But, and once you'd respond and put the resuscitating, device on somebody, it gave the appearance that they were kind of breathing on their own. And he said that was something where, people would, family members and that, they'd almost be relieved to see that. And that wasn't the case. It was just the fact that they had been intubated and this machine was making it appear that they're breathing on their own when it was just pumping air in and out, and their lungs were inflating and deflating. So, you saw this motion which replicated somebody breathing. So he said that was always something where you had to kind of tell people what was going on in a tactful way, because they would kind of get their hopes up, like, oh, they're breathing now. Well, no, they're not. So here were the cons that I found regarding why not to donate. Okay, now, of course, there's plenty of pros. I mean, in most of the websites, and we all know that. I talked about my former administrative assistant waiting for, a liver, and the fact that, if my body is, if I'm dead, and there are parts of my body that can help somebody else out, why not? So, it seems very logical from that standpoint, but here's some of the cons, that people have noted. So one is no readiness to condone a bad habit. So these are the people who are saying, you know what, I'm not checking the donor box because somebody who drank their entire life, or somebody who was a drug addict, and they cook their liver. Why should I give them my liver? Why should I give them a second chance because of their bad habits? So it's kind of like punishing someone, although like you're dead, and it's this weird punishment type thing because like you're not around anymore. I don't know. It's this almost weird spite, I think. So the research says that 5% of organ donations are because of cases like that, where people have not taken care of their bodies, and 95% are because of other things, viruses or whatever, failures. genetic things, stuff like that. So, but it's interesting because, yeah, someone who would just say, I'll take a perfectly good liver to the grave with me or to the crematorium because I'm not going to give it to the alcoholic. So they knew what they were getting into. Anyway, another point, mistrust of the medical profession and doctors. And, I trust my doctor and the medical profession. But again, here's where it linked off to one or two stories where it was saying that this is lucrative. I mean, you can sell body parts to, research firms, and that there are some people, doctors who've been involved in cases like this, which again, you could find for anything, for any profession. You're always going to find a few people who have done something, really egregious to the code of ethics of the profession. So, but so that was it, saying I don't trust that. And the other part is of saying, what if the, the mistrust of the medical profession too. I don't think I said that, but anyway, let's go on. Confusion about this was a big one. Confusion about brain death and biological death. So this whole thing of, when I said splashing the cold water in your ears and then like touching your eyes with a Q-tip and things like that, cotton swab, whatever. That seems pretty primitive. Like, I guess the brainwave test, but this is what we know right now, of the brain and the tools that we have to measure things. But what if there's a level of consciousness that isn't showing up on the current machines that we have? So, and the fact that, a doctor can make this call of brain death when the body could continue on in a vegetative state for years. So it gets to that whole question of the subjective nature of making this call, and what if they get it wrong? But I mean, again, through history, I mean, there's obviously been people who have, by percentages, by odds, who have been, put in a morgue and buried, who have still been alive. I mean, they used to, what was it, in the Middle Ages, put a little rope down into the casket, and then it would be above ground and connect to a bell. So if suddenly you became conscious, you could ring the bell and somebody would dig you out. I think that was obviously that was more of myth than reality. I mean, you weren't constantly out there digging people up as the bells are ringing, but this whole way to maybe get people to accept that. And I don't know, maybe because you did have people who were stricken and unconscious and whatever, and then they would just perceive that and say, "Oh, they're dead," when they were unconscious. But I mean, again, I think today we've got the equipment to pretty much nail it down. And I guess I would have no intention to live in this vegetative state. But yeah, this whole confusion about brain death has people kind of on the fence. It's like, I think there's that episode of Kramer. Well, what if this, or what if this, or what if this? Would you stay or not stay, or pull a plug or not pull a plug? But yeah, to me, it's not that obscure, but I guess for some people, it's like, well, if I have a chance of opening my eyes and coming out of this, but again, I think that's just wishful thinking, and I don't know. I just don't see that as realistic. But I can understand this whole confusion about brain death, because again, do we really know the level of consciousness? But then if we can't tap into it, the person is just there in a vegetative state. I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. I think as time goes on, that will be revealed through, again, the different diagnostic tools will be available to us. Uncertainty and lack of confidence. This one kind of struck me too, because some people are just feeling my organs aren't good enough. Like I'm not in good enough shape to be an organ donor. I'm too old to be an organ donor and stuff like that. And, so yeah, people who almost have this feeling of inferiority of their own bodies. Like, I don't want my body to be, seen by, the harvest team and stuff like that, because like, I'm not fit. Like this would, it would almost be an embarrassment. It's just this weird logic that goes on. Or someone that's saying, yeah, I mean, I should be taking better care of myself. I should be out running. And I ran tonight too, by the way. So like I biked and I ran. Yeah, this whole lack of confidence thing. So no, I'm pretty good with that. I'm fine. So I need a haircut again. Like my hair, I was getting it cut like every 5-6 weeks, and now it's got to be like every 4 weeks. If you're watching this on YouTube, like this was trimmed down about 4 weeks ago, like literally buzz cut down, like the sides were bare. And, now it's crazy. And my hairstylist or person that cuts my hair, for a long time, but she's like, you have some of the fastest and growing hair, and your hair is very thick, of anyone like I've known. There's a few other people, but like, yeah, like your hair just grows like wild. So, which is great, so maybe someone can take a hair transplant and get some of this stuff. Cause yeah, like people I know my age, like most of my friends getting pretty thin on top. So, thankfully, I've been blessed with, Grandpa Reinhardt's hair, I've been told. Another con here, another reason to not be a donor, psychological discomfort. So people imagine their organs being harvested and they're disgusted by the image of somebody, a team of surgeons opening them up and taking out what they need. Or not what they need, but what's able to be potentially used as a transplant organ or tissue or whatever. So that whole image. But I mean, that gets to the other part of I talked about in a podcast, and not to I don't want to make this sound how should I say, insensitive, but it's like the other image, in my mind is I can't imagine myself in a casket, just, turning into a skeleton over a number of years. And especially if it's these sealed caskets where the process is just delayed. I just think that doesn't make any sense. So, these whole things of the psychological discomfort, again, you're not going to be around. Okay. So, another con, confusion with religion and cultural issues. So saying, the religion wouldn't allow it, but here's where, again, research has shown most religions do embrace, organ donation, and most, pretty full, some with some limitations and whatever, but it's not really an issue of religion and not even so much an issue of culture. So that argument's kind of out the window, but it's some of those people of saying like, like I'm Catholic, for example. So thinking, well, for the resurrection, if you're not buried intact, I'm not going to be buried anyway, but I guess, then you won't be able to participate in the resurrection. So like, well, I guess I miss out on that then. But yeah, that's kind of not the case. Catholicism says they support, being an organ donor. So my conclusion from this is, I'm not changing my mind. I'm sticking with the organ donation, box being checked on my driver's license. Like it's just a circle, or I don't know if it says organ donor. I don't know what it says. And then, there's people on waiting lists for organs who die every day. And it's not a perfect system. You can only get organs so far away in so much time, and it's whether or not it's accepted by the person, whether their body accepts it or rejects it. So was this all done in vain and whatever? And it's like, well, but you know what? You're trying. And I think generally people are, the physicians, the people who are involved in the support structure of organ donation are doing this, for the right reasons. Also, we're at this time where 3D printing of organs, of tissue, of live tissue, not that far off. Like I actually think they can do this on kind of a small scale right now. But I would say by the time, if I live a natural lifespan and die, which kind of was inferred there, right? But so no, like a natural lifespan, by the time I would pass, I think all of this organ donation from a live donor is probably going to be obsolete. You're probably just going to be able to create these parts, these tissues, organs, whatever, and they're going to be created from the person's own genetic materials, so they're not going to be rejected or through something that's going to be more, it would just be universally accepted. So I think we're kind of at this phase in this whole organ donation thing where it's kind of toward the end of the road. But yeah, I think, really in another, well, let's say 40 to 50 years, would we have a need for an organ donor? I just don't think so. And so many things on the horizon. AI, artificial intelligence, projected to hit singularity in like 2040, 2042. So, kind of matching some of the human thought processes, not consciousness, but you're going to have this just advance in robotics and AI and all of these types of things, 3D printing, that are going to, I believe, kind of make all of this obsolete. But in the meantime, I think there's great merit in becoming an organ donor. And I guess here's the benchmark I use for that. Like if this was me, if I needed a heart, if I was in need of a liver, or if it was, one of my kids, I definitely would hope that somebody would have checked that donor box, and their life ending, which is probably going to end tragically or unexpectedly, but their life ending would give an opportunity for either my life to continue or my kid's life to continue. I would really be indebted to that person. So, how does this all fit into safety? Now, that's one of the big things. Obviously, it's a Safety Doc podcast, right? 75. And I'm trying to get some guests. And I've had success, like with some people I want as guests, but it's a scheduling thing. They're not available right now, or they're in a position where they're leaving like one organization and getting into another one. So they want to make sure they have both feet in the other organization before they come on the show, because they're going to talk a little bit about some of the things from the previous organization. Nothing that's going to compromise, obviously, security or ethics or whatever, but they want to be kind of out the door before they talk about some of those practices. So got some really great guests lined up. And I want to have Justin Dooley back on, but I want to have Preston Rice. Preston was on last year about this time. We did the drone episode, 2 parts. And that was when I actually went out and filmed him demonstrating the drones. But so much has changed in the last year, and he contacted me not too long ago and said, hey, let's do another show. I probably wouldn't like actually do a live show filming the drone, but I'd have him down here in the studio. And since I've got the Zoom mic and all that, we'd set it up a little bit better. The audio wasn't the greatest last time. I think we'd have good audio. And he can talk about all the new stuff that's kind of developed in the drone world. And one of the exciting things also in the drone world is with search and rescue, the ability to have these coordinated synchronized drone, like reconnaissance of an area, and then also kind of search and rescue, because it, even up to like just recently, up until a year ago, it was very, very rare for drones to be able to work together, like in certain quadrants, and know like what one covered and what one didn't, and then to give all that information back into a system and have like kind of this mosaic put together. That really still wasn't happening. The military, it was January of 2017, was doing drone swarm tests, I think, where they would drop, from an aircraft like 100 drones, mini drones, and then those drones would kind of all act as one, and then could do surveillance over an area and stuff like that. But there's huge potential in like rescue, so I want to get him in to talk about that, and then also the laws, like all of these laws and these signs that go up, like this is a drone-free area and stuff like that. And I know he was saying some of those are legit and some aren't. I saw that when we were on vacation. I don't know if it was at Custer State Park or somewhere where they had you couldn't bring a drone, like it wasn't allowed. I don't know if it's Custer, but somewhere is some of the state park stuff, so I couldn't do it. No. So, and I have just a couple stories to share here at the end. One, I was out running a few nights ago, and I'm running on the track, and the football field, something is starting to run alongside me, and it's low to the ground and it's wide. So I kind of sensed what it was. So it's a little bit in back of me, but it's kind of like angling toward me, and it's picking up speed and kind of waddling. So I take my flashlight, put the light back. It's a skunk. And I've encountered skunks before. I think I've talked about this, running, and I'm gonna have to rethink my game plan here, but because I don't want to like startle a skunk, that'd be very bad. So I just kept running. Run, Forrest, run! I took off like I was flying, and got back home. So now I've been going to the track earlier while it's still daylight, but I mean at some point that won't be feasible anymore. But once you hit winter, in the cold months, you don't have to worry about that anyway. So, like when I run in winter, I don't have to worry about coming across skunks out at night, because, they're not searching for food because ground's frozen, snow covered, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's kind of a crazy thing. So I am, looking forward to a podcast series, which is coming out from Hector Solis, an awareness podcast on bullying. So he gets very in depth also with a mother of a girl who was 12 and took her life due to being bullied. So he has that series in production right now, looking to release it later in summer. So check that out. It is awareness podcast, and he is very thorough in what he does. A shout out again to the 405media.com, the 405media.com. That's where the Safety Doc show is aired daily at 2 p.m. PST. You can go there, and it's basically a radio station of podcasters, and listen to Larry Roberts of Readily Random, been on his show. And Larry always has intriguing guest, Aaron Clary, the Clary podcast. So go out and check the 405media.com. I want to thank all of you for listening to the show, for considering the different aspects of safety, being astute to what's rhetoric, the hype that's out there, and also to kind of stand strong when you're when your friends or other people are like in one position, but you're not in that position. Here's an example. In my community, the school district has put bollards, bollards, but they're basically they're what you see in front of buildings, like if they back in like big trucks and stuff. So they hit these things first instead of like hitting the doors or the supports and things like that. So they're protective, but the district has put them in front of the main entrances to the school, like right in front of the main entrances. From a safety grant, and the thought is that this would prevent someone from driving a car through the main entrance, which it probably would. But the fact is, like, that just doesn't happen. And 2 of these buildings already had superstructures outside, like, covered entrances with brick or cement pillars. So it wouldn't have happened anyway. Like it wasn't going to happen. And these aren't there to protect like the sidewalk so someone couldn't jump up on a sidewalk. You could still do that at any of these locations. And one of them, actually, they expanded the sidewalk. They made it wider. So I was looking at that saying, here you have in front of the school these bollards, which will be very difficult to handle in winter, to try to shovel around these things. It'll get icy. It's Wisconsin. I'm trying to get stuff in and out of a building. You're going to have to navigate around these things. And even if you had a bigger wheelchair, you kind of have to like shoot right through the middle to get there. To me, I want to ask the district for the safety study where they came up with the priorities. Now it's kind of like playing with house money. It's free money because it's from the state that set aside $100 million for school improvements for a lot of stuff like this, which doesn't make sense. So like, what is your two-way radio communication, like your digital radios? And there's not a school out there, if you surveyed them, I'm not a big fan of surveys, but if you go and you're asking people at the schools, how are your radio communications? Most likely they're going to say, there's some dead spots in the schools. Maybe you need a repeater, or they still have analog or a mix of analog digital, or they can't speak between buildings. Or people just say, I wish we had more of these radios. Like, I just wish we had more radios. And we also have students, with, violent tendencies or things like this. And so if we had more radios, we could get more people to respond if something happened. So that's one of the things. And just your, what's your threat assessment? Like in the district here where my daughters go to school, as a parent, there is not an online threat assess. There's not an online threat input system. And if there is, I haven't been educated to it, and I'm a safety expert, so they haven't done a good job of getting that out to parents. So I'm just thinking, what other things did you consider, and like, how did you determine that this is what you'd ask for? And then also, was it like you asked for other things and they were denied, but the bollards were approved? But again, these things are going to cause more headache than benefit. And my guess is they didn't do a comprehensive study, and that this got marketed to them, and that there are other areas of need that got neglected, the prioritization matrix. And this is the whole rhetoric with safety. Working on wrapping up my book right now with my editor. That's coming along great. Working every day on that right now, Lessons of Lower Manhattan. And we give some examples. You could go into these things, but this whole thing of trying to fortify your way to safety, it's impossible. You cannot do it. You cannot fortify your way to safety. So you have to have sense-making.
This has been the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio show host, and leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Remember to check back each week for the latest, best, and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. You can find Dr. Perrodin on Twitter @SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.